Hello ladies, welcome to Homemakers Radio. I hope you get a few things done while you listen today. I don't have comments here on the channel, but I would like to invite you to go to the place where I have prepared this for. I'm preparing these videos for my blog to enhance the message that I have there, and I'll leave a link so you can go leave a comment there if you like. And before you go and get about your business, I would like to show you my teacup today. It is I guess you could call it apricot color. Has a beautiful little emblem in the middle and the inside, and it's by a company called Meritage. Might want to look that up. I'll try to leave a link for you. I got it at Home Goods a couple of years ago, and so today I have quite a message for you, and the idea is to find something to do that is repetitive or that you really don't want to do, so that you have something to listen to as you go. I know I have my favorite music and my favorite videos that I like to listen to, but sometimes I'm tempted to stop and look, and I need radio is so much better because you can keep working and going. I don't want to do podcasts at this point. I prefer to also add things to my blog so that later on you might like to go back and look and see what's going there. And so today I want to talk first of all about our first things that we talk about here, and that is appearance. And don't ever think that it doesn't matter. The day that you decide you're just going to slop around in your slippers and your pajamas is the day that you're needed somewhere else, or that someone comes to the door, or that you just don't feel prepared, or things kind of fall apart around you. It's amazing. You know, I think that appearance is related often to our performance and to how we perform something. To me, getting dressed in something that suits the season, suits my mood, and colors that I like, and they energize me, is kind of like putting on armor. It's like a protection. It's like my apron. I would wear my apron over this during the day, and it would make me feel like I had some kind of protection. And so in a way, the way you dress is your uniform, although there is no specific uniform for the home. And this is the beauty of making your own rules and being home, is that while at work you might have to wear something that has the emblem of the company that you're working for, or some kind of uniform, or a code, a dress code. Maybe they don't have a uniform, but there is a code. And even if there isn't a code, most people at work, especially women, have a type of code, things that they wear to work that you wouldn't wear at home or out or anywhere else. And so at home you can develop your own way of living and your own style, and you can dress as you like and what makes you seem to perform the best. So that's what I like to do. Especially, I'm very visual. Color means a lot to me, and also design. And I am a sew person. I love sewing, and I like fabric, so that means a lot to me. So the appearance should be cheerful or seasonal. No uniform except something decent and with personal preference, and that makes your family happy. You know, if you've ever been sick and you've had little children, and you've had a few days where you've had to lay around on the couch and you're just kind of giving orders and monitoring the house from the couch, and then one day you get well, you get dressed up, you fix yourself up, you take care of your skin and your hair, and one of the children will say how pretty you are. And so you know that it does have an effect on our people and our family. And these are our people. This is the domain that belongs to us, and the Bible says that we are supposed to guide the home and guard it. That's our job. And so I think it's a special place. It's like your own personal castle, and you should be dressed for it. And so it should be your own personal preference, your own dress code. So if you have not got dressed yet, or if you just want to listen, that's fine. But this might be a good time to hang up, call me back later, go and get dressed, take care of yourself, come out, and then make a list of the things that must be done, the urgent things that must be done. Or is the kitchen spilling over with things that need to be cleaned up or put away? Is the laundry room, the bathroom, all these little things. And one thing that I think for homemaking that's very good idea is not to wait until things are urgent, not to wait until they need to be done or have to be done, So to go in and put the things in the dishwasher that you need to. Don't wait till your sink is piled high. And to just clean as you go. Just kind of move around the house and whatever other thing you're doing that maybe not even be houseworking. If you see something that is out of place or needs to be done, just straighten it up, and that will save you a stress cleaning day. Or you know what that's like, is something has to be done, or you have to go somewhere, someone has to come, something has to be cleared out. If you'll clean as you go. Now let's say you have just successfully cleaned up something and you have a room that looks pretty good. The best thing to do with that is maintain it now. Go back every now and look at it for inspiration and pick up something and move something and maintain it. Don't let it start. If someone leaves something somewhere, a good training is to ask them to, if it is a personal belonging, to ask them to put it where it belongs. I know people like conveniences. They like to have a pencil and paper laying here and laying there, so they won't have to go find it. But that's what adds up, I think. And we think, oh, that doesn't look too bad because there's only one sitting on the table. But it seems to be a magnet for other things. So clean as you go and maintain. And also I'd like to talk, besides just housekeeping, because homemaking and being a home dweller is not all about work all the time. However, there is an area that is kind of a bit of work, but a lot of ladies neglect it, and that is using the home to its full potential. You know, you can do other things in the home. You don't have to just make it a place where everyone comes for a meal, or everyone goes to sleep, or everyone uses the shower. These things, these places that you live in your home, these little spots, can be made beautiful, can be a way that you could use your talents to embellish them, or to create an atmosphere and tap into your artistic ability. Or maybe you don't have artistic ability, but maybe you just have an eye for beauty, or you have an eye for order. You can use your home to a better potential. And it all goes back to your mind, making up your mind, or looking into your mind as to how you can limit yourself. Unfortunately, we let ourselves limit ourselves, and this is where this home, this place, is where you'll work, where you'll create, and where you'll be a health provider. That's why we indicate that you have to be sanitary as much as possible, and to make it a nice place where people look forward to being. It's also harder to thrive as a person in disorder. It's harder to keep a healthy, optimistic mindset in disorder. That is something that we overlook sometimes. People wonder why they feel a little bit on the pessimistic side. And check out your life and see if it's in disorder. Are there papers that need to be sorted through? Are there books that you need to go through? If you think there's nothing to do, everything's neat and tidy, dig a little deeper. Find something every day that you can put in order. Is there a drawer here or a drawer there? I have a little bookshelf that my husband built when he was in high school, when they used to have what was called shop classes, and all the tools were there, and the young men were taught to, I think they were about 18 when they went to that class, and they were taught to build things. And he built a little coffee table and a bookshelf. Well, I have the bookshelf, and it was in his mother's house for many, many years. And whenever we visited, I was astonished at the two top drawers, always jammed full of pencils and every imaginable thing that went with office. But she always knew what things were, and she could open a drawer and get something out. And she would say, I'm going to clean out those drawers someday, and she would. But in no time, I'd be back for a visit, and it would just be bad again. And I felt kind of sorry for her, and I even cleaned them out a couple of times. And then the bookshelf was never in order either. And I inherited the bookshelf, and now I have the same problem. There's just something about those two drawers that attract all that stuff. And now, of course, we're not so full of pencils and chalk and erasers as much as we are full of electronic equipment and old things that go to phones and computers and plugs and things like that. And I opened one of those drawers the other day and wished that I had not been so critical upon seeing it at someone else's house, because it's the same, it's just the same thing. But there's always something that you can clean out. There's always something and what happens there is not that you're becoming a fanatic in your housework, but that you are organizing thinking in your mind. So don't look at it as like, oh, I don't want to go to this grueling chore. Think of it as mental health repair. Just imagine how you feel. One of the things that I learned when I started watching and exercising with a video class, I learned that although it's not comfortable at the time, learn to enjoy how it makes you feel afterwards, and it's just amazing. And so clean out that extra thing, clean out that little box of old whatever you have, and do it for your mind, do it for yourself, do it for your mental health. So of course there will always be something, we'll look at those things and we'll walk past them for years and think, that's just an insurmountable job. And then when we finally decide to do it, it takes, half a day or less. And also what it does to your mind, it invigorates you, it makes you happy. And I used to think that it would drag me down, it would make me tired, oh, it would be so boring. But to clean something out and to get it in order is extremely healthful for us all. As a matter of fact, in the olden days before doctors were so eager to hand out prescriptions, they used to tell people to go home and clean out a drawer or clean out something, or they used to have something that you could do and that would be very helpful for your health. But it is harder to thrive in disorder, and if you find you have a little nagging feeling about your house, it's just not quite what you want, go clean out something. You'll find that you'll become more creative, and you get all kinds of ideas. When I'm moving things around and sorting all these little bitty bits of things, pencils and erasers, I still have them, because we're still living in the olden days, but I'm getting ideas. I'm getting all kinds of creative ideas from how things can be fixed, how things can be more orderly. It's really harder to be creative in disorder. And I'm getting to the point now, because I am finally getting back into some of those closets and rooms that have agonized me for years. I'm getting to where I'm going to be able to reach my goal of joining the Fly Lady. I just go to her site and I read what her daily work is and what the week's agenda is. I don't really have it coming in on email. I find the email a little bit too much because it's a lot of advertising for her cleaning products. But I am not quite ready to get on board and join the weekday program, but I'm getting there, so that now that I get it all cleaned up, I can join the weekday program, so that on a certain week everything will be one room. I'm not ready to do that yet, but I'm getting closer, and it's making me very happy. And today, while we talk about homemaking, is your attitude, because if you're raising children, and by the way, these videos are not for women over 70. They're not for women over 40. They're not for all married women. They're for everybody, and they're for very young people too. So if you're a young girl at home, these might help you. I don't think there's anything in here I would discuss which would be too grown up for you, and I really think that it's good when you're very young to develop good habits. You will automatically do them, and I've known several women who were so automatic in their housekeeping. I have been with someone who she grew up in an English home with an English mother, and they lived in Canada, and she said it was so bred into her to pick up after herself. She would not leave a chair, she would not leave a seating area that she had been in without straightening up something that she had, whether it was books or papers or things like that. She'd pick up her shoes and she'd leave, and even straighten everything else up before she left. Everything, you couldn't tell that she had been anywhere in the house, because the only way you could tell that she had been somewhere in that house is it was always neater after she had been in that room. If she was in the bathroom, she'd straighten out a towel. She would clean the sink. She would do something. And she was never, and today she has a very sharp, very, very sharp mind. And she really enjoys life, and she tries different things. And it's because she's not bogged down with old housekeeping, with years and years and years of mind-boggling messes that are almost insurmountable. She's kept up with it. But it's not too late for any of us. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that will help in the home. And I know that you like to be homeschooled. So I do want to homeschool you today, but one of the things I'd like to do is show you something that I find a great deal of delight in. And I don't like to promote other people's publications or magazines. I'm not selling anything, but I wanted to talk to you about it because it's so good for your emotional situation, especially at a time where you might feel isolated. You know, homemaking is isolating, whether or not, whatever's going on politically. Homemaking's always like this because you're going to have to be self-employed and self-motivated. And so that is one of the reasons why I thought, well, it would be nice to talk about some of the things that people have told me that have motivated them. And one time when my husband had to be away on a trip and I was just married, my grandmother came and stayed with me. And she said, and she was a widow, and she told me that when her husband was on a trip, that was when she cleaned all the floors, waxed all the floors, aired out all the things, you know, blankets and bedding, and it's when she took her curtains down and washed them because she didn't like to be too much upheaval in the home when he was there. She didn't like to work around him so much that he was uncomfortable. So she just waited, and when he had to be out, well, that's when she would do things. And I learned something from that because if you're home a lot, that's when you can do things. And I've been home a lot lately. By the way, we have wonderful weather here in Oregon. I'm not from Oregon, but we have wonderful weather here, and it's raining. The wind is very high. It's green, and the air smells very nice. So we're very blessed. But I'm staying in because it's a bit windy, and it's a bit blowy, as they used to say. Well, I wanted to show you a couple of publications. And of course, if you're not getting them, sometimes you can get them for as low as $2 an issue. If you mention it to them that you've heard of these offers, sometimes you can order them separately, or you can subscribe to them. And one is Victoria. Now, Victoria started in 1987, and I have the very first issue. And it was very lovely. It was so different from all the other cheap women's publications with cheap paper and advertisements all over the place that the women, especially the Christian women, just went all agog over it. Well, it changed hands a couple of times, and one time nearly completely died out because they had this new publishing company that had taken over it has taken to putting ads in it that were offensive to the women. They might have been ads that were maybe not so much about the home, too much liquor, too many other things that were in there. So the Christian women just quit subscribing, and the magazine nearly quit. But now the recent ones that have had it are really doing an excellent job. There are no advertisements in it, and they're about the home, or if they travel, and gardens. And if they travel and they publish something that's about the travel, it's usually about a historic home or somewhere else where people dwelling places. And they like to write about things of interest to everyone, but they are so far the most superior of all the publications. In fact, I was looking at one of the older ones from 1987 and thinking, why did we think this was so great? Because the new ones are very nice. They're so much nicer. I think the reason we thought the early ones were so great is that there was nothing like that in the women's magazines. The women's magazines had gone so far to, not so much about the home. You hardly could read anything about the home. It was mostly about issues. But the Victoria magazine is about the home. So I wanted to show you they have special publications throughout the year that aren't by subscription. And they're called Victoria Classics. And this one is called Autumn Bliss. And they have one called Spring Bliss. And they may have one called Summer or Winter. And one of the things that I like about it is if you lay it on your coffee table, the back of it always has a beautiful picture on it. I have set this up on my, I have a little ledge where I sometimes set things that are pretty, like a picture that isn't framed and it kind of sits on this ledge. Well, I'll use this on the ledge. And then here's the recent one. I don't care for the front of it as much, but the back is very pretty. And Then in the back of them, in the back page, it's amazing what they do with these. There is like almost a fly leaf in the back, and it has a beautiful picture of the season with a saying or someone that, from a book, like a Jane Austen quote. And this one says, "The brightest summer had passed away, and gorgeous autumn was flinging its rainbow tints of beauty on the hill and dale." And then in the front of it, and I think that you can afford this. I think you can afford to pick these magazines up, especially since most people are not traveling, they're not dining out, and probably not out shopping as much. And, the costs go down when you stay home sometimes because you're not using as much for transportation, and you're not having to, and if you're not working outside the home, you're not having to keep up with some of the expenses. But here is an end paper on the inside. So instead of opening up the magazine and there's an ad on the inside, they have another, this could be a painting. "For man, autumn is a time of harvest, of gathering together. For nature, it is a time of sowing, of scattering abroad." And then throughout the magazine, they will have beautiful, beautiful displays. It's better than Ideals magazine. Remember Ideals from the olden days? It's almost better. They were pretty good, and they have beautiful photographs too. And I like also the way that they have some of the pages looking like chapter titles with a border, beautiful border around it, and I forget what kind of paper that's called. It's a marbled paper there, and they kind of have it divided into chapters as far as I could see, and they'll have everything from food to entertaining to the outdoors to also sometimes creative things and reading, and then I like the end papers, the little chapter sections here. Anyway, I wanted to show you that and tell you that if you need something, and it's interesting when you order something like Victoria or Tea Time magazine, they are Hoffman Media publications, and they keep their old issues, so you can order the older issues if you've missed them. Whereas a lot of the commercial magazines will just, I don't know what they do with them. I think they throw them out, but you can't get them, and you can get them at Hoffman Media at a cheaper price. And if you will subscribe to Tea Time and Victoria, it's very interesting how they seem to come on one of those days when you really need something bright, and they'll come in the box and you'll look at it and think, this is just what I need today. And one of the things I like to do is just lay it down, and when I finish the kitchen or finish something that needs to be done, I'll go back to one of those. And women always needed something like that, and I think Victoria is trying very, very hard under the circumstances to make it a really blessed issue with beautiful blessings in it for you. And this is what I'm trying to do here too. So now I wanted to talk to you a little bit about homeschooling. And the reason I say homeschooling is for you, it's for everybody. I don't care how old you are, you can be homeschooled now, because I was a homeschooler and I have all these things, and I can read to you and I can tell you about it. And so I have a couple of things here I want to read and use as comparisons. And it always scares me when one of my sticky notes has come out and landed somewhere else, because it means I've lost a page that I wanted to read to you. But I had talked to you before about Booker T. Washington's book, and I wanted to remind you that you can go to Dover, which is a publisher, and they have a better book, and it's probably better for children, a little bit better, easier to read, larger print. This one has a section in the back half. Almost half of the book is taken up in things that people wrote about Booker T. Washington, and a lot of his speeches in the back. But so if I had a choice, I'd go to the Dover one. And so today I'm going to read to you about some of the things that Booker T. Washington did. As you recall, he was the child of a former slave, and I think he may have been 9 or 10 years old when his mother brought took him up to the big house where an official was announcing to all the residents of the plantation about the emancipation, and his mother said, "It will be hard for us. It will be hard for all of us. We're going to have to learn a new way of life." They had nowhere to go, and they could not stay there on the plantations, and they had to learn a different way of life. And so Booker T. Washington was so encouraged by his mother, who was probably a driving force in his life, which shows you what you can do as a mother and a grandmother, to help other people, that he decided he wanted to start an institution or a school, which would be a boarding school, to help these people come out of slavery and come up in the world, not just come out, but come up. And that's what we're doing here at home. We want to come up and to a way of life that is more refined. And this is what he was teaching them. And this is what you do when you're homeschooling, because your children, of course, aren't born refined. And, of course, they're going to be under your rule for a long time. But you want them to be able to survive when they're no longer under your control. You want them to be able to think how to think. You want to be able to teach them how to learn how to figure things out, how to enjoy learning, and how to pursue it themselves without you standing over them all the time. So that by the time they're very young, I mean, when you're homeschooling them, by the time they're 9 or 10 years old, if they have learned how to read, they can take off almost on their own as far as learning is concerned. And then they need to be guided into good choices, and to have a good standard, you know, of what they will read and what they will do. Remember, we used the verse, whatever is true, lovely, good, and just, and things of quality, things of virtue, think on these things. And so that was what Booker T. Washington was doing, and he was providing a school. And in order to create this school, he wanted to do some research. So he went around staying with people. He mentions one of the places he stayed was in Birmingham. And of course, this was in the 1800s. And this reminds me, too, that one of the things that I did, and a lot of homeschool mothers did back in the 1980s, was teach their children how to interview. And so our children, they interviewed famous people like the Apostle Paul, and we used the criteria: who, what, when, where, why, and how much. And so he introduced, like I would say, interview the Apostle Paul on this subject here, or this trip that he took. Who are you? Where did you go? What did you find there? How did you react to it? When did you decide this? And why did you do it? And so who, what, when, where, why was a criteria for an interview. And they had to write these interviews out. So it would be Q&A. And they would also interview other famous people and, you know, people from their history books, and interview them, and then get their answers out of the text that they were reading. And this is a wonderful way to learn good conversation, too, because what we're seeing now in modern news media, and have for years, is they abandon the who, what, when, where, why, and how much, and they abandon the facts and started to ask a question and then go for someone's throat, and it becomes an accusation. Whereas in the olden days, it was who, what, when, where, why, and how much. And you found that even the Apostle Paul on the when he did his sermon on the goodness sakes, I can't, it's just fleeting my mind, but he said, I see over here you have many gods, and here you have a statue to the unknown God. That's the one I'm going to talk about, instead of going in there and running them down because they had all these other gods. He had to keep their attention. You can't turn people off very quickly if you want to get a message across. And it was Paul's sermon on Mars Hill. Not that far gone yet. And so we observe techniques from the Apostle Paul, and particularly the book of Philemon, which was an excellent book on human interaction and the study of human behavior. So I'll go back to Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, because what you're going to find in this book is so excellent. I did try to hit some of the high points in previous chapters, but then I started reading it again and discovered some things that I had missed. And what you're going to find is what he was doing was exactly what we need today. And I was thinking how far we haven't come, because some of his observations were just like, oh no, this is what's happening to us in our society. And he was trying to bring his people up from some of these old habits. And he said particularly he had a hard time with, he could correct their habits and he could correct the way they dressed, but mentally he had to correct the idea that they didn't think they were capable. They didn't think they were capable of anything. Do you feel like that sometime? Well, then this book is for you. This is for everybody. But it was particularly for a people that had been used to a certain way of life where they didn't really have to think very much for themselves. Their food was provided, their homes were provided, and now it was a scary life. They could not survive unless they had learned how to look after themselves. And this is the way homeschooling is too. That's why this book is so important. So I'm going to read some of it to you, and then I'm going to compare it to a book that we used in homeschooling for young men, and you're going to be rather thrilled at how this correlates. And I don't want you to think that just because this subject is not about homemaking that it doesn't apply. It does, and you're going to see it and hear it in so many ways. All right, so this is his autobiography. This is his diary. I reached Tuskegee. That was the name of his institution that he created for the former slaves. Now, many of the people that he educated had not been in slavery, but their parents had. And because their parents had, they still had to learn how to look after themselves. As I have said, early in June 1881, the first month I spent in finding accommodations for the school and in traveling through Alabama, examining into the actual life of the people. Now see, this is a way you research. You go and observe how things are done. That's how you research, and you see it. Now sometimes I'll have a ladies' Bible class, and so we'll be reading a chapter through, and I'll be listening to everyone's comment on the chapter, and I will observe what areas we need to work on, who is a little confused about something, and maybe where we could grow more and how it could be more effective. You have to observe real life. And you know, we do that in the home all the time, don't we? We kind of walk down through the halls thinking, how could I make this more efficient for all of us? How could I make this a pleasant place? How could I make everything a more pleasant experience? And one of the things you have to understand is that the strongest bond we have is between the mother and the child. And that is one reason why it's so good to be able to teach them yourself. Because one of the ways to break down a nation is to take whole generations of children away from their parents and educate them away from home in a different doctrine than the parents believe, and also maybe in something that the parents don't even know about. And so the children come home quite changed, quite distinctly adversaries to your own values and to your own beliefs. And it could be something simple like wanting them to be neat and tidy, wanting them to be clean, wanting them to take a shower, and they start resisting some of these things, and it's because this bonding has been taken away from the parent and the child. It's very important to keep that bonding even when you're a grandmother. And if you're a young girl at home and you're starting to kind of look on the web for ideas, maybe religion, maybe you're exploring religion and you join up with someone and it's against your mother and father's values, or you sense that they are going to resist it, and you start wanting to correct your parents, and this is a way that maybe this group has pulled away your bonding from your family. You need to be very careful what you do, and to keep those things in mind, because God created the family for a reason. Do you remember that old song, For the Beauty of the Earth? And there was a third verse in it, for the joy of human love, brother, sister, parent, child, things on earth and things above, for all something meek and mild. And I think sometimes we get the idea that that a family is just some place you just happen to be born into. You're just kind of flopping around there till you do something more important. But that bonding is very important because God created it. The joy of human love, brother, sister, parent, child. So I'll read about his trip to Alabama, and it was a research trip. This is very important. How do you find out something? You observe. The first month I spent in finding accommodation for the school and traveling through Alabama, examining into the actual life of the people, especially in the country districts, and in getting the school advertised among the class of people that I wanted to have attend it. For most of my traveling, the most of my traveling was done over the country roads with a mule and a cart or a buggy wagon for conveyance. I ate and slept with the people in their little cabins. I saw their farms, their schools, their churches. Since, in the case of most of these visits, there had been no notice given in advance that a stranger was expected, I had the advantage of seeing the real everyday life of the people. In the plantation districts, that is one thing we used to do when I was younger, in the olden days. The church ladies would get together to take some basket of food to someone that they knew was more poor or in need, and they wouldn't tell them they were coming, and they would go because it would give them a chance to see what else was needed and see what some of the other problems were, and that way they would be able to see where maybe something needed to be repaired, or where maybe they needed help with something else. And what was it? It was said in Emma when one of her friends came and she said, "Have you told your father you're here?" And he said, "No, I like to surprise everybody when I come." In the plantation districts, I found that, now this was after the plantations were over, some people still worked there for pay. In the plantation districts, I found that, as a rule, the whole family slept in one room, and that in addition to the immediate family, there sometimes were relatives or others not related to the family who also slept in the same room. On more than one occasion, I went outside the house to get ready for bed, or to wait until the family had gone to bed. They usually contrived some kind of a place for me to sleep, either on the floor or in some special part of another's bed. Rarely was there any place provided in the cabin where one could bathe or even wash their face and hands, but usually some provision was made for this outside the house in the yard. The common diet of the people, he said, was cornbread and meat, and the meal of which the bread was made having been bought at a high price in a store in town, notwithstanding the fact that the land all about the cabin homes could have easily been made to produce nearly every kind of garden vegetable or grain that is raised anywhere in the country. Their one object seemed to be plant nothing but cotton, and in many cases cotton was planted up to the very door of the cabin. Now, this is something he wanted to change too, to show them how they could grow other things. Because the cotton gin had been invented, and they would not always be able to work the cotton fields. In these cabin homes, I often found sewing machines which had been bought. And this is a lot like some of us, so you're going to learn something from this. Or were being bought on installments, frequently at a cost of as much as $60, or showy clocks for which the occupants of the cabins had paid $12 or $14. I remember that on one occasion, when I went into one of these cabins for dinner, when I sat down to the table for a meal, and the 4 members of the family, I noticed that, while there were 5 of us at the table, there was but 1 fork to the 5 of us to use. Naturally, there was an awkward pause on my part. On the opposite corner of the same cabin was an organ for which the people told me they were paying $60 a month in installments. 1 fork and a $60 organ. I know I'm saying that today, as in any other time, people are very impractical that way, aren't they? In most cases, the sewing machine was never used. The clocks were so worthless that they did not keep correct time, and if they had, in 9 cases out of 10, there would have been no one in the family who could have told the time of day, while the organ, of course, was rarely used for want of a person who could play upon it. In the case to which I have referred, where the family sat down to the table for the meal, at which I was their guest, I could plainly see that this was an awkward and unusual proceeding, and was done in my honor. In most cases, when the family got up in the morning, for example, this is why I say how far we haven't come, because in some cases, this is the way it is with people. When they got up in the morning, the wife would put a piece of meat in the frying pan and a lump of dough in the skillet. These utensils would be placed on the fire, and in 10 or 15 minutes breakfast would be cooked. Frequently, the husband would take his bread and meat in his hand and start for the field, eating as he walked. The mother would sit down in a corner and eat her breakfast, perhaps from a plate and perhaps directly from the skillet or frying pan, while the children would eat their portion of bread and meat while running around the yard. At certain seasons of the year, when meat was scarce, it was rarely that the children who were not old enough or strong enough to work in the fields would have meat at all. The breakfast over, and with practically no attention given to the house, that's for us to think about too. The whole family would, as a general thing, proceed to the cotton field. Every child was large enough to carry a hoe, was put to work, and the baby, for usually there was at least one baby, would be laid down at the end of the cotton row so that its mother would give it a certain amount of attention when she had finished chopping her row. The noon meal and the supper were taken in much the same way as the breakfast. Now, see, he was observing, trying to see what he would need for the school, need to teach at the school. All the days of the family would be spent after this much the same routine, except Saturday and Sunday. And so it said on Saturday the whole family would spend at least half a day and often a whole day in town. The idea of going to town was, I suppose, to do shopping, but all the shopping that the whole family had money for could have been attended to in 10 minutes. Still, the whole family remained in town for most of the day, spending the greater part of time in standing on the streets, sitting somewhere, or doing other things. Sunday was usually spent in going to some big meeting. With a few exceptions, I found that the crops were mortgaged in the counties where I went, and that the most of the farmers were in debt. The state had not been able to build schoolhouses in the country districts, and as a rule, the schools were taught in the churches or in log cabins. More than once, while on my journeys, I found that there was no provision made in the house used for school purpose for heating the building during winter, and consequently a fire had to be built in the yard, and teacher and pupils passed in and out of the house as they got warm or cold. With few exceptions, I found the teachers in these country schools to be miserably poor in preparation for their work, and poor in moral character. The schools were in session from 3 to 5 months. Now, I noticed in the public schools how careless the teachers had become in the way they spoke and the way they dressed. It used to be, if you ever read any of Jeanette Oakes' books or watched any of the Hallmark movies about the teachers that went up to teach and live in the teacherage, they called it, a little house for the teachers. They had all these rules of when they could be out and what kind of clothing they had to wear, and they had to be very respectable or they would be dismissed because their salary was paid for by the parents. And what I found out in the public schools is that teachers had grown very, very lax in many things and did not regard their profession as something to stand up straight for, dress up for, and be pleasant for. The schools were in session from 3 to 5 months. There was practically no apparatus in the schoolhouses, except that occasionally there was a rough blackboard. I recall that one day I went into the schoolhouse, or rather into an abandoned log cabin that was being used as a schoolhouse, and found 5 pupils who were studying a lesson from one book. This is quite an interesting picture. 2 of these on the front seat were using the book between them. Behind these were 2 others peeping over the shoulders of the first 2, and behind the 4 was a 5th little fellow who was peeping over the shoulders of all 4. What I have said concerning the character of the schoolhouses and teachers will also apply quite accurately as a description of the church buildings and ministers. I met some very interesting characters during my travels. As illustrating the peculiar mental processes of the country people, I remember that I asked one man, who was about 60 years old, to tell me something of his history. He said he had been born in Virginia and sold in Alabama in 1845. In giving all these descriptions of what I saw during my month of travel in the country around Tuskegee, I wish my readers to keep in mind the fact that there were many encouraging exceptions to the conditions which I have described. I have stated in such plain words what I saw, mainly for the reason that later I want to emphasize the encouraging changes that have taken place in the community, not wholly by the work of the Tuskegee School, but by other institutions as well. He was researching so that he could, and then later on he described some of the courses and classes that he held in Tuskegee, and the teachers taught on how to dine. And they had people who would donate things like silverware and dining tables and napkins and dishes, and teach the students how to sit, how to have a meal. And I got curious about mealtime one time and looked up on YouTube to see if there were any videos on mealtime, and there was one on how mealtime came about and how it evolved, but it couldn't keep my attention. There was something about it that just didn't grab me, so I didn't learn too much about it. But apparently, but I don't believe that there was no mealtime and that people didn't sit around a table. Otherwise, why would you have Jesus meeting in the upper room to celebrate the Passover, and they were sitting at a table, and there were dishes there, and one man put his hand in the same dish as Christ, and there were cups, and there were goblets to drink out of. And so yes, this mealtime wasn't just invented. It's just that certain societies tend to let it go, and I'm afraid we're back where we started, sometimes. So I want to talk to you about this book because it sort of coincides. In fact, the person that read it must have had the same idea as Booker T. Washington, and it was Wayne and Emily Hunter, and it was written in the 1960s, I believe. No, 1975, Man in Demand. Now, I have read parts of this and then read later on, how people mocked me for reading it. But it was one of our, before we had curriculum, before curriculum was boxed and you could order curriculum, we just went around and found things that were the most wholesome, that were more helpful to our children. And this was one of them, Man in Demand. And then the female counterpart was Christian Charm Course, which taught it from the female perspective. But this was about keeping clean, keeping neat, keeping tidy, and dressing. And I'll show you one of the first pictures that I read to my boys, or that when they got to where they were old enough for this book, they could just read it themselves. But it was called, Does My Appearance Make a Difference? And I will read you some of the excuses in this. And this is why we need these kind of classes, but we really need them in the home, and they need to be personal with the one child. You get people in a class, and sometimes they don't perform as well because you become self-conscious around other people. And you also could feel picked on, and maybe if you're not quite as physically fit as the others in an exercise class. This book also had exercises in it. If you're not as physically fit, you become self-conscious, you can't keep up, you become discouraged, and you just say, well, I'm not athletic and I can't be fit. And so it's better to teach one-on-one, better to teach the parent to the child, and it also creates that kind of home bonding that you need. Does it matter how you dress? What difference does it make how I dress? So ladies, you can apply this to you and to your home life, and I hope some of you younger ones are listening. If I want to look like a mess, it's nobody's business but my own. You think that's true? If you are in view of anybody, it is other people's business. What you look like, it just becomes other people's business. Your manners are other people's business too, because they're affected by it. If I want to wear dirty, ragged clothes, so what? Isn't the man inside the one that counts? People have no right to judge me by my clothes. I'm a pretty decent guy at heart, even though I don't always look and act that way. And they'll often, even a Christian will use that scripture about how man looks on the outer appearance, but God looks on the heart. Well, I think if you research that a little bit, It just meant be careful about judging other people, but it didn't mean that you had an excuse to ignore your appearance. Besides, who wants to become a clothes horse? Do you know what a clothes horse is? Maybe you could look that up. Clothes horse costs money, and I'd rather spend money on a better car. The one I have looks like a wreck. See the inconsistency in that? He's very concerned about what his car looks like. I'm ashamed to be seen with the old thing. Besides, I spent a lot of time on these clothes, adding false patches and stuff, and fading my jeans and cutting them. Why should I discard all this and dress like a square? That's artificial to me. Should clothes be important? Yes, look how much of him they cover. And it goes, you'd have to have it. And I like that they used drawings and cartoons because young people respond to that and they really, really like that. And they make some very good points here. Follow these clothing rules. And surely Booker T. Washington would have had something similar to this, because when these students were in their rooms before they came to classes, he had to go and inspect the rooms and inspect everyone. They had to stand up in their room, and they could not have clothing that was unbuttoned or buttons that were loose or missing. They couldn't have stains on their clothes. Their grooming had to be impeccable. Make sure your clothes are neat and clean. Follow the suggestions in the page on preventing grooming disorders. Conform somewhat to others, but don't lose your individuality. Dress appropriately for the occasion, the activity, and the role you'll be playing. You know, we used to know that you wear sports clothes when you're playing sports, or when you are in an outdoor activity, you would wear your outdoor clothes to rake the leaves. But we never really thought anyone would say, well, then let's just wear our sports clothes to breakfast. Let's wear our sports clothes to church. Let's just wear our sports clothes all the time. But we always agreed, everybody on both sides of this opinion would always want to wear sports clothes when you're having sports. You wouldn't dress up. You wouldn't wear a tie. You wouldn't wear a dress. You would just play sports. But they started to bring it into all the time. Be color-wise. And then it tells, this is for boys, so it tells how to coordinate their colors. And so then I want to scoot over here to another page I have marked with my little sticky tab here. And it's all about preventing grooming disorders, and they have a little chart here and with numbers on it. I haven't quite looked at that, but preventing grooming disorders. Okay, this might help your reluctant young man at home who just doesn't care, and especially if you're homeschooling, it's very tempting just to lay around for 3 days without taking a shower, because who cares? But every day is a gift from God, and that's why we should shower and get dressed and start a new life. Every day is a new life started. That's what I've always believed. The old is past, and we start a new life. It's a new world to us. It's just like being born all over again every single day. And okay, so here is how do you rate grooming in this grooming check? You're going to be a little amused by it because maybe you've experienced it. I bathe only when my mom forces me to. I washed my face, neck, and ears this morning. Or, I skipped it, I didn't think it mattered. My teeth are clean, I brushed them this morning. And here's the alternative. My toothbrush is dry, I cannot lie. I've washed my hair at least twice this week. And the alternative is, it's too much trouble, and I like it dirty. My shirt and pants are reasonably free of dirt. And B, they're a little grimy, and C, as they could have been washed days ago. And every button is in place. oops, some are dangling, some are missing. Now we might find that a little different today because there's not so much clothing requiring buttons. I'm wearing socks and shoes. I wear socks only, no shoes. I wear shoes only, no socks. I'm the original barefoot boy. And so it just goes on and on. There's quite a few here that you might be interested in. And this is a great investment. There's also a teacher's manual that goes with it. I always found it nice to get the teacher's manual, get more information. And you can turn it, if your child is old enough, you can turn the teacher's manual over to them too to study. So this is called Skip Your Bath or Shower at Your Own Risk. This is interesting. You might want to apply it to you as a homemaker, you know, because I always say get ready first, get dressed first. It puts you in a different mood, different mindset. You know, I got actually dressed up for you today, and I wondered sometime if you'd like to have a video where I'm just going to talk to you about maybe some other things in your homemaking life, and you got dressed up just to come and listen. And it wouldn't be a clean as you listen or work as you go, work as you listen, but an actual kind of a little seminar where you got dressed up to come and listen. And I have had a Zoom class, which was absolutely delightful. The ladies that invited me were dressed up, and they had their teacup, and they told their story, which was, you know, kind of a little biography of themselves, and which was absolutely delightful, and enjoyed it a lot. Okay, I'll just skip my shower today. I'm sure I look crummy, but I don't feel too great anyway. And if I'm not worth much, why try to fix myself up? And I'm such a mess, I'm sure I don't like myself very much, and I hate everybody else too. The feeling must be mutual. No one sticks around me. I wished I'd gotten on the other side of the bed, the side next to the shower. So here was the declension of it. If you ever studied Latin and you studied declension and how you break down a sentence and what it means, here's how it works. When personal cleanliness suffers, so does your self-respect. When self-respect diminishes, so does your grooming. It just kind of interacts, doesn't it? If you don't have a feeling of self-respect and you feel gloomy, you tend to not want to take care of yourself. When grooming suffers, your personality suffers. And also, you know, your witness for Christ falls flat. And it's basically Bible-based, and it's all about how this is going to affect others who might be a believer, except for maybe some of the things that, some of the problems that a person has if they're not taking care of themselves. And then they have a how to take care of your closet thing here, which is really good. I don't know if people are using closets as much as they used to. Not sure what people are doing anymore. But it's how to keep your things in order and keep them clean. And there's a picture of a closet in here that's just all apart. All the drawers are open. You can't tell the difference between the clean clothes and the dirty clothes. How to take command of your closet. Don't hang things on a doorknob unless you want to go around looking like this. It shows how the shirt he's wearing has a doorknob shape in the back where it was hanging on the knob. Clean your closet, remove all clutter. Organize your clothing, all pants together, all shirts together, shoes in a shoe rack, ties on a tie rack, belts on a belt rack. Store your clothes properly. Brush off lint and hairs, empty overloaded pockets. Close openings to retain proper shape. Hang your clothes on correct types of hangers. Yes, there are different types for different clothes. This is quite a thick book. It's beautiful, Man in Demand. So ladies, I hope that this has been helpful to you today, and that to go back to the beginning of taking care of your appearance will help your performance, and to treat your house to its full potential. Do more than just clean it. Do more than just keep it, and do a lot to make it different things come out in it, different things that you can do for your home. It can be a center for all kinds of activities for you and your family and for other people. So ladies, I hope to see you next time. And if you have time today, please leave a comment. And I hope to have a different kind. I hope I'm finished with Booker T. Washington's book, and I have some more for you next time. We'll talk to you later.